the Dalit cause is one that you're very sympathetic
Yes.
with, as you mentioned in the book itself.
Yes.
But sir, I would really like to know if you could highlight the points where you are absolutely on board with them and where you think things should be done differently. Namaste, I am Dr. Nayna Bhandari, a dermatologist by profession and an associate at Indus University, which is a technical university for engineering, aviation, architecture, design, and humanities as well. And today we have with us Shri Rajiv Malhotra ji, who is a very eminent intellectual personality, speaker, and the word prolific does not begin to identify his abilities as a writer. He is also the bastion of changing India's narrative in front of the world and putting out the right narrative. And so at Indus University, we are very, very proud and privileged to have him with us today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I've been here a few times and always enjoyed myself here because the students and the faculty are all so enthusiastic and so sharp. We had a great launch yesterday of my book. Big, huge auditorium, hundreds of people, and good questions were asked. So I'm excited about this conversation with you.
I'm so happy to know that, sir. And so let's get into the nitty-gritties of it, which is discussing your very first chapter in the book, Snakes in the Ganga. And the first chapter, as you have titled it, Debating Indian Culture's Legitimacy in the United States of America. Let's start with what you call the European origins of the old left, which is Marxism and postmodernism for the most part. Would you like to define these terms and give their context to the youth today?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea when you talk about the global left, which is now centered in the United States and has created wokeism as sort of the latest idea and exported all over the world. But it's a good idea to go back in time. So, you know, Marxism started in Europe and then comes to the United States. Postmodernism in the next century starts in the United States and starts in Europe and comes to the United States. And then these amalgamate and turn into other things. So let's go one at a time. Marxism was this idea that, you know, there are oppressed people and there are oppressors, and the oppressed people need to have a revolution to get rid of the oppressors. So this was based on economic oppression, not religion, not race. Okay, he didn't talk about, you know, some religion is oppressing others or some race is oppressing others. It was all economic. And the proletariat are the workers and the bourgeoisie are the elites and so on.
The capitalists.
So capitalists. So this is the theory.
Right, sir.
And this is how it went throughout the 1800s and the Lenin revolution in Russia and all that. But then when Germany became fascist, when Germany hit the rise of Hitler, the rise of Nazis, as opposed to having a communist revolution.
Right.
Because they had the same economic problems like Russia used to. But Russia went and had a revolution, communist revolution. Germany did not.
Right.
So it bothered the Marxists because they predicted Germany would have the same thing.
Right.
But it didn't.
Right.
So they came up with a new theory, which is a very elaborate theory, but it's called the Frankfurt theory, Frankfurt School.
Right.
To kind of amend Marxism in order to show that the outcome could have been, while it could have been a revolution like in Russia, it could also have been the rise of Nazism, like fascism, like it was in Germany. Okay. So that was the second wave of Marxism, if you will. And then some of these Marxists from Germany come to the United States.
Right, okay.
Yeah, they come to the United States and now they Americanize it. They come to the United States mainly in Columbia University and in Berkeley.
Right.
And so when Herbert Marcuse comes to Berkeley, and he's a very young man and he's very dynamic and prolific, very kind of a radical Marxist, and he starts looking at American society and adapts Marxism again for American society, particularly race.
Right.
Particularly, he realizes, understands that here it's a different issue than in Europe. So he comes up with this, and this gives rise to, some years later, gives rise to a new form of what I think is an adaptation of Marxism, and that is critical race theory.
Okay.
Because in critical race theory, you have oppressed and oppressor, like in Marxism, but now it is the oppressed are the blacks and the oppressors are the whites. But the rest of the logic is all the same. The oppressed have been subject to a hegemonic discourse. The oppressors created. The oppressors created the discourse.
Right, sir. So if I may just interject over here and state that now, as per the critical race theory which was created, there were no farmers or no laborers that were involved, because this was more of an infiltration through the academic intelligentsia. So how did it really shape out to be, and how did it get its impetus, and how do we see it today in the real world?
Good question. So before critical race theory, there was critical legal theory.
Right.
By a professor of law at Harvard Law School.
Okay.
He came up with this. So his idea was that the oppressed are blacks in the legal system. And he was only talking about legal system. He was not talking about jobs and society and all that. And he established it with some facts that they're getting tougher sentences. They are prosecuted more. Whites get away leniently. So he gave all that data. And he came up with this critical legal theory that, it's a white system. The structures are white in the legal system, and they're oppressing blacks. But then, they generalized it to everything in society. They said that that critical race theory now applies to everything in society, and the blacks are being oppressed, and the whites are the oppressors. And since the whites, in the critical legal theory, they came up with the law and the whole legal procedure that has to be dismantled. But now in critical race theory, all of society structures are by the whites. And so to dismantle them and liberate the blacks from the slavery, mental slavery and socioeconomic slavery, you need to change the whole discourse. So the hegemonic discourse is what the whites have created. So now there needs to be counter-hegemony, which means we have to have reverse discrimination. You discriminate against me and oppress me. Now I'm going to oppress you to get even and topple your discourse with my discourse. So this is the origin of this whole thing called discourse wars. And this whole thing called cancel culture. So, I want to cancel you because you are an oppressor. Now, this is one thing. The other interesting thing is, you don't have to have individually done anything wrong. I don't have to prove that you have done anything wrong. You were born in an oppressor family. With an oppressor lineage. Even if your father never did anything, your parents, your grandparents never did, still, by virtue of your identity as part of that community, you're enjoying the privilege of oppression. And I, because I was born in a certain family, am suffering being oppressed. So by birth, you are oppressor. By birth, I'm oppressed. This is kind of a birth-based kind of a thing, which means race becomes very important.
Race becomes very important.
Yes.
Right. So, and it also seems like a very heavy burden to be bearing for a youth who may be alleged that you're responsible for this in some way or the other. A youth who may have just started out their journey and would have no inkling into the history of these concepts. So, sir, on that note, I would also like to bring postmodernism into the picture. And if you could please give us some context as to how it connects to a critical race theory and how intersectionality also comes into play, because as you stated that from binary, from Marxism, which was more of a binary outlook, we go on to critical race theory, which seems like or wokeism, which seems which has intersectionality play a huge part in it. So if you could please define these terms for us as well.
I think that's very important. So postmodernism had nothing to do with these things that got later adapted. It starts in France and in various parts of Europe. And postmodernism basically is a critique of modernism. Because modernism is oppressive. Modernism has created Nazis, it's created World War II. Modernism created colonialism. So to overthrow all this hegemony of Europeans, the European came up with a critique of themselves, their own prior history, and that's like postmodernism. So our history has been modern. We are very proud of modern history as Europeans, but we think there are a lot of serious problems socially. So we want to be postmodern. So
Right.
that became the fashion.
Right.
And there were several ideas in postmodern, but one of the most powerful ideas was that all narratives have power hidden in them.
Right.
So whether you are conscious or not, you are writing something, and your privilege is showing in the narrative.
Right.
It's hidden. I have to tease it out.
Right.
So I have to
right.
teach my students in English honors. I have to teach my students when
Right.
you read something by a male, patriarchy, you have to look for patriarchy. When you read something from a white guy, you have to look for racism. When you read something from a Brahmin, you got to look for some casteism.
Right.
Whether he intends or not, whether he's
Right.
conscious or not, doesn't matter. He's unconsciously racist.
Right.
It means now it's very difficult to defend yourself. If I say you're racist unconsciously, you say, no, I'm not. I'll say, but you don't know it because it's unconscious.
Right.
How do you defend yourself? Yeah, it's like I can't get in your brain, but I claim I have knowledge about you. You
Right.
know, so you're saying, but I'm not consciously racist at all. And you say, no, you don't know it. You're trying to protect. You try to cover up. You're trying to cover up. You should
Right.
admit it.
Yeah.
So you say, but how can I admit something? I don't think I'm a racist. So this is a very serious problem.
Right.
That postmodernism says you can be unconsciously, into the power play, writing things as a somebody who's oppressor, even if you don't know it, even if you think you don't intend it, but unknown to you, you are playing that game.
Right.
It's a very sort of a dangerous corner to be put into.
Right.
You know.
Very dangerous and pessimistic at the same time.
Yeah. And so it says it was started out with looking at texts.
Right.
And looking at the texts were written and trying to deconstruct them. They use the word deconstruct to pull out what is the oppression hidden in the text.
Right.
Then they started talking about dance and art and culture. Everything created by the dominant culture contains oppression.
Okay.
So we have to find it.
Right.
So, the fact that this person is got a bindi, maybe it's some history of some oppression. Maybe these people, maybe it symbolizes blood or something, that these guys had some bad thing happen to them. So
Right.
all the art also hides in it oppression.
Okay.
And we have to liberate the art by pulling out this oppression.
Oppression.
And we are the doctors. We
Right.
in English honors have
Right.
studied this.
Right.
And we are going to go around the world
Right.
and figure out how the people have been oppressed.
Right.
And we are the sort of social justice people. So suddenly people studying English honors
Right.
became the social justice people of the world, because they knew how to tease out texts.
Right.
And art historians,
Right.
art critics started doing this for art.
So could you please give us some examples of how this can play against a lot of the groups, such as white males or Brahmins, or any other context that you would like to show a light on?
Yeah. So the thing is that the assumption made is that whites in America are heterosexual, and they have this patriarchy,
Right.
and they've been oppressing not only the blacks but also women and also homosexuals.
Right.
So these are the three primary groups that they have oppressed.
Okay.
So now this mapping that whites are Brahmins in India and blacks are the Dalits.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this racism is playing out in India for a long time.
Right.
Okay. In fact, it played out in India longer than American racism. There was
Right.
no America in the United States at the time,
Right.
and this was playing out in India. That's what
Right.
they're claiming. So now the Brahmin texts, all the Vedic texts, all the Shastras are like similar to the white supremacy texts in America.
Right.
So they're suspect.
Right.
And so the Pandit who recites that is a supremacist.
Right.
And he's a hegemonic guy. And we have to dismantle all of this whole system. We have to dismantle.
Right.
So it's like you have to dismantle the whole society, the Indian society, at least its ancient origins and
Right.
its foundations. You have to dismantle that.
So-
That's
so-
pretty serious stuff.
It is very serious stuff, because I would like to go back into history on this note and ask you that when Marxism tried to do that, to some extent, was it a success? And because history buffs would know that it was not. So if you would like to give your input on it.
So that's a good point. Marxism has been successful in destroying structures, but never been successful in building anything new.
New. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, this is a flaw, because Marxism says that the established thesis the established discourse is because of the dominant people.
Right.
Okay, and that is called thesis, and therefore we now need to build an antithesis.
Right.
Okay, and the antithesis should be built by the oppressed people. So this antithesis will fight the thesis,
Right.
and they'll both be dismantled,
Right.
and society will fall apart,
Right.
and then a new thesis will come, which will be
Right.
better to solve the problem.
Right.
Now, how it will come, they never said. Who will do it, never said. Have they ever had experience doing it? Of course not. So Marxism, wherever they've done a revolution, whether to whatever extent, they've created destruction.
Right.
But they've not created anything new out of it.
Right.
You know, if you look at Soviet Union, Russia, after the revolution, they were not able to create a new society,
Right.
which is why they failed.
Right.
If you look at North Korea, you look at Cuba,
Right.
you know, China, they have to transform itself to a capitalist society. You know, transform its entire ideas. Because no Marxist revolution has ever produced a happier outcome than the previous one. They've created destruction, and that's it.
Right.
So now for them to say that they've exported this into the caste idea, and now the Dalits are the people who should have a revolution against the Brahmins, basically creates a lot of violence. It's not going to help the Dalits.
Right.
Nobody, it has
Understandably
never,
so.
it'll just create a lot of vacuum of power. Everybody will destroy each other, and nobody's going to win, and the people in the foreign countries may have something to gain because they could come over and take over. And that's my concern.
Right, sir. And if history has lessons to be teaching, then we have lessons to be learning, and this is obviously one of the very important ones. So on that note, I would like to ask you that Europe, for the most part, was not safeguarded from the effects of Marxism, but America was, as I think America took a more pragmatic stance. But that was Marxism. Now we are talking about critical race theory and wokeism. And so please go into more depth about what dangers lie with America and with these ideologies taking over America.
You know, I wrote a book, Breaking India. So I started this project by writing a book called Breaking America.
Right.
That's Breaking America.
Right.
And,
it is the first chapter.
But then after writing 300-400 pages, and you know, I said, you know, there's more urgency in India.
Right.
So I got to write more India. So
Right.
I collapsed that into just one chapter of this book, and the rest is all on India.
Right.
But I still have that other project, Breaking America. I have to write that, finished it off.
Right.
So Breaking America is basically this whole leftism, Marxism, turned into a study of race and creating a violence between the races. That critical race, that's called critical race theory. And its popular form in popular language called wokeism.
Right.
Wokeism, very, very nice meaning. Wokeism was a black term that we got to wake up. Now, obviously, everybody should wake up. There's nothing wrong with wokeism. So wokeism in its pure form is a very good thing.
Right.
But it got appropriated by the left, by the Marxists, to turn it into all this thing. And then when Black Lives Matter happened, because a black man was very brutally killed, which is a horrible thing that happened, everybody sympathized with it. Our foundation funded Black Lives Matter. I was sympathetic. I joined this Black Lives Matter movement. But soon it got appropriated into this very Marxist thing.
Right.
And also Muslim groups in America appropriated the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of Islamic people came, and now there is this unity of blacks and Islam and Marxists and into this critical race theory.
Okay.
So they've all been brought in from different sides to kind of hit out at the majority culture of the whites. Okay, I'm not saying the whites are noble people, that they've not done anything wrong. They have done lots of wrong things, but I'm against the idea of dismantling America.
Right.
I think that there's a difference, as an architect, there's a difference between remodeling a building and fixing up its problems and dismantling the building.
Right.
If you dismantle the building, then you better know what to do next, because these people have no experience. Remodeling is more kind of systematic, and you don't create chaos.
Right.
You don't destroy things. You can just remodel them. So there are provisions to implement in the Constitution. You can enact new laws. You can change things like that in a way. The previous liberalism, up to Martin Luther King would be against wokeism.
Right.
Martin Luther King would be against wokeism, because Martin Luther King didn't want to dismantle society, didn't want to dismantle families. He felt that within the existing system, blacks could be given equal rights, and that would be fine.
Right.
That's all he wanted.
Absolutely, sir.
Barack Obama was not wokist. Barack Obama wanted that blacks should enjoy equal rights with whites within the structures of society.
Right.
He did not say, let's dismantle these structures. So this is a very recent thing. It's post-Obama. In fact, many of the people I've quoted in this book who are wokeist leaders criticize Obama for not going far enough.
Okay.
And they and they don't want to criticize Martin Luther King because that would be suicidal for them. But they're not quoting him as much. So this wokeism has new prophets. The new prophets have been born, and I call it the Church of Wokeism because they are full of dogma. They are not listening to any outside criticism. That would be heresy. That would be blasphemy. And you would be like church has this idea of blasphemy and heresy. And only the high priests of wokeism are allowed to speak.
So it sounds as though wokeism is at odds with the left liberal outlook.
Yes. So now the new liberals call themselves progressives.
Right.
So this is a vocabulary people should understand. People who are in the liberals call themselves progressives. They are breaking away from the Bill Clinton liberal and the Barack Obama liberal and the Martin Luther King liberal and the John F. Kennedy liberal. That was liberalism I related to. I would support those guys. I voted for them. I support them. Okay, but now we are going beyond that. Now you have in the Democratic Party the progressive wing. You have a couple of these Muslim women who are truly radical in their ideas of Hinduism and all that. Some of them are supporting Pakistan. They are into all kind of crazy things. And then you have Pramila Jayapal, an Indian, and Ro Khanna, an Indian, in the US Congress, who are taking these very extreme progressive views. So you see what's happened is in America, the Democratic Party has gone way too much to the left. It used to be a party of the center. I mean, they wanted to bring everybody in, give them rights, but do it in an organized way and not like a violent revolution. So now these people on the ultra left, I call them ultra left, they are kind of like radical Marxist type people.
Correct. So at this juncture, I would also like to talk about intersectionality that you talk about in the book. And if you could please, in brief, highlight the differences between the groups that may have been on the same side that are, but are now at odds with each other, although superficially still remaining one group, and it is all due to intersectionality. So, sir, if you could please give us some examples of that as well.
Intersectionality is a further extension of critical race theory, and it says that there are some people who have multiple causes of being oppressed. So a black woman is oppressed because she's black, but she's also oppressed because she's a woman.
Correct.
Right. So she's double oppressed.
Correct.
So that's intersectionality. So she has something in common with blacks who are men also. And she has another thing where she's a woman and she has a lot in common with women who are whites also.
Correct.
But her oppression is not fully captured purely as a black.
Correct.
And nor is it captured purely as a woman. So being black woman and intersection of these two is a very special kind of oppression. So she would have problems with feminists, okay, on many issues because they're not black. She'd have problem with feminists. And she'd also have problem with black men who are black, but they're not women.
Correct.
So this is a kind of weird thing going on. Now you can keep creating any number of these. So if I wanted to get sympathy as an oppressed person, I would say short men, like I'm a short guy, bald, so I'm a short and bald. So short men, they have been oppressed because all these things are for tall people. And bald men are oppressed because we don't get jobs and we don't get this and that. I can show some data and I can come up with some testimonials and build a rabble-rousing case that bald men who are short are particularly oppressed people, intersectionality. And then those who are wearing glasses, because there is prejudice against those wearing glasses. So bald, short, glasses guy, and left-handed, I'm left-handed, the whole world is for right-handed people. So I could just go to crazy things and come up with a whole new idea of oppressed.
Right.
And the whole society is oppressed me. And then I gang up with others like me and build a community to overthrow all these structures. So actually it is absurd. It is absurd because it's not practical. It's highly destructive and dangerous. And you know, the way what really bothers me is not weird ideas, because we should debate them and I'm fine. People have these ideas, but I should be allowed to debate. But it's this business of cancel culture. which says that those who disagree are not allowed to speak because they don't have the lived experience. So I would say, as a short, bald man with glasses and left-handed, you don't have the lived experience. This one doesn't have the, only I have that lived experience. I'm going to cancel all of you. I'm going to be speaking. So now this is ridiculous.
Yes,
you
and
end up with
it sounds like a lot of insecurity on the part of wokeism, more than what you would expect from a so-called short and bald man, as you say.
Right.
Yes.
So, every kind of person has some problem. I mean, somebody is too thin, now there's something called fat studies. There's a field called fat studies.
Okay.
So fat people are saying that they're oppressed because the whole society has a stigma against them. Now, you would say, as a doctor, you would say, well, we want you to slim down. It's good for your health. They would say it's a social construct that you're calling us fat and there's something wrong with us according to you. There's nothing wrong with us according to ourselves. So, it's actually irresponsible because if that lifestyle should change for their own benefit by saying it's okay, the stigma against fats is a social construct and you're being oppressed and you should get political rights to fight back, you're not helping those guys.
Correct.
I mean, they're not helping them because maybe they need to slim down. Maybe medically they need to slim down. So now there's all kind of, these are called grievance studies. Grievance studies means whether it's a bald guy, whether it's a guy wearing glasses, whether it's a guy on a cane who's handicapped, whether it's someone fat, whatever the thing may be. If you have a grievance against society because you feel that there's some kind of a handicap or a stigma, then you organize a political movement and this critical race theory has a place for you.
Correct.
So it's a society of victims. It's like glamorizing victimhood. It's like you go looking for victims and you empower them and you say we're going to club all the victims together and we're going to overthrow society. That's pretty dangerous.
So as you've used this term in the past and which I can think of now to sum up what you've just told us, then that term would be moronizing. So I would like to know...
Moron, to pronounce moron,
sorry.
moronizing.
Correct.
Making morons, making morons out of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So, sir, I would like to know what would Marxists or wokeism get out of moronizing society at large or moronizing the masses at large?
So, morons are people who can't think for themselves. So the term I used in the context of social media and artificial intelligence and trying to sell them things. So dumb people, you can sell them what to buy because they don't know. They are very vulnerable to advertising. Dumber the people, the more they're vulnerable to advertising. So you tell them where to go for a holiday and which religion to convert to, who to vote for. They don't have critical thinking skills. They're morons. So they can be dumb. They're dumb people, so you can manage their decision making.
Correct.
Okay. So for any revolutionary Marxist type people, critical race type people, such people are very useful because you can mobilize them to do dangerous things, destruction. So they go around the world and want to create these morons and then empower them with violence, make them feel like somebody else is the fault. The reason you don't have jobs is not because you don't have hard work, but somebody else is oppressing you. It's always somebody else's fault. No self-responsibility.
Correct.
And
it does sound like a recipe for disaster.
And they're against meritocracy.
Correct.
Because they feel that one of the problems in the world is this white supremacists have come up with the idea of meritocracy. And in India, it's the Brahmins who've come up with the idea of meritocracy. And therefore, these IITs have been attacked because meritocracy is just a front, a cover-up for supremacy. So because you are supremacy, you are superior, and you've imposed on me, you're calling it merit. But I don't think it's merit. So you have this Suraj Yende at Harvard Kennedy School going around saying that so many trillions of dollars are owed as reparations to the Dalits. Correct. He says that the Indian state should give so many trillions of dollars to the Dalits because...
And a cause with the Dalit cause is one that you're very sympathetic with, as you mentioned in the book itself.
Yes.
But sir, I would really like to know if you could highlight the points where you are absolutely on board with them and where you think things should be done differently, if we could get more
so
into details.
I think that first of all, I agree with them that there has been oppression and prejudice and social injustice in the past, and it should not have happened. I disagree with them that is caused by Hinduism's essences. I think those are bad qualities humans have. Muslims have that, Christians have that. In every society, you've had oppression and social injustice. It's not some monopoly of Hindus.
Correct. Okay. And so one does not need to ascribe those qualities to the dharmic traditions.
Correct. And so that I disagree with. And then I also agree with that something should be done.
Correct.
Okay, whatever the cause is, something should be done. We should reform it. I agree with that. And I'm sympathetic with it. And I've done a lot to help people in my own personal capacity, and also as an institution we have done that. But I disagree that you have to dismantle all the structures and create chaos.
Correct.
That will create anarchy. Okay. And also, I agree with them that there is hegemonic discourse. After all, there's colonial discourse, and we need to decolonize our discourse as Indians. So there is hegemonic discourse. We're also suffering from it. But I don't agree that you have to cancel those people and cancel them out, censor them out, silence them, shut them up, and take over, because then you've replaced one hegemony with another. And I don't trust the hegemony from below to be any better, because in taking revenge, they'll be as violent, maybe worse. So I don't trust that. I think you have to be responsible, you have to be balanced. I like the kind of thinkers that liberalism produced until 10, 15 years prior to this. They produced good people, and that kind of a liberalism is true liberalism. So true liberalism I support. True liberalism says everybody should be taught to think for themselves. They should have critical thinking skills. They should inquire. They should be able to debate and disagree. They should be able to ask questions, and they should be able to tell, you don't have to have ideological homogeneity. So ironically, when they talk about diversity, they're talking about identity diversity, but not diversity of ideas. So they will have a lot of different people of different identities clubbed together, but they all have to believe in critical race theory. They all have to believe in those are the bad guys, we are the good guys. So there is no room for dissent internally. If you join that club, you're not allowed to dissent.
And that can be a very dangerous thing.
Yes.
So, sir, on this note, let's talk about identity politics, which is a concept that you also talk about in the first chapter.
So, identity politics, like for one person called Dipti Rao, in the introduction, she's an LGBTQ person, lives in the tech industry, an Indian, lives in the United States. Great person, good friend of mine. She's an LGBTQ person very openly, and she says that the problem was when she joined this LGBTQ groups in the United States, they wanted her to not be a Hindu anymore.
Correct.
So this is a very strange thing. Why can't I be a Hindu? So there's a bias. So there's an agenda. So if you are LGBTQ, you can't be Hindu because Hinduism is the culprit. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Christian, you can be all kinds of things, but you can't be a Hindu. So there is clearly a bias. And so she resented against that. So I admire such people. I admire people who can stand up to this. And that's an example I want to give of people who've experienced oppression from within the so-called oppressed people.
Correct.
The so-called oppressed people in one context are oppressors in another context.
Correct.
You have to be, this is very fascinating. So oppressor, oppressed is not sort of like a flat scale. I mean, it's a very complex scale. You might be oppressing me in some ways and I might be oppressing you in some other ways. We have to, so this discussion has to be open.
Correct.
And then you can have more intelligent solutions.
Correct. Okay, that's very well stated. So on that note, let's move to the rejection of science, rationality and meritocracy, which you have in part already covered. But let's also bring in equality and equity into the equation here.
So they are against science, rationality, because then that means you can give logic and you can ask them, there is no evidence in your favor and your logic is flawed. They don't want to hear that.
Correct.
So because they want cancel culture. So, therefore...
So you were trying to say that lived experiences are given weightage over any traditional or established text or any empirical evidence for that matter.
That's correct. So if the lived experience of the oppressed says 2 + 2 = 5, that's what it is. And believe me, there's a Stanford professor and a huge movement who goes around saying 2 + 2 is not always 4. It depends on your cultural and social context. So it's weird. So you're confusing people about basic math also. So there's no such thing as objectivity.
Correct.
There's no objectivity anymore. There's no rationality.
Correct.
So this is very dangerous stuff. Now, as far as equity and equality is concerned, equality means that everybody has an equal opportunity and some will win, some will lose. So everybody starts the race in athletics and some will win and some won't. And everybody has an equal opportunity in swimming or in whatever. Or in mathematics, or in in a career. Equity says that if the outcome is unequal, so some people went ahead of others, that's because of structural bias.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
and therefore we have to produce equal outcome. And that means that if some people are not good at math and their scores are bad, it's not that that's meritocracy and these guys are inferior. There's something wrong with the system. The system is biased. So we got to get those people artificially boosted to be equal. Now that's very strange. It means that the assumption is that everybody's got equal talent. And so everybody's got equal talent, false assumption, because the world is diverse. There are some creatures that run faster than others. There are some people taller than others. Everybody's bodies are different. Nature is full of diverse flowers and fruits and animals. So why would all human beings be the same? You know, in terms of talent and in terms of quality, we are different. Some people are good at singing. Some people are good in math. Some people are good in athletics. So just like our bodies are different because, you know, we have different faculties, brains are different.
Correct.
So we have different strengths. So there's nothing unnatural about, that's real diversity. That's real diversity.
Absolutely. Sticking to one's Swadharma.
Yeah, Swadharma, that's right, you use the right term. Krishna says, follow your Swadharma, which is very personalized. My Swadharma, I'm good at that. This is my calling. Somebody else's is some other Swadharma. And Krishna says, it's better to you do your Swadharma than to copycat anybody else's Swadharma. Whereas this equity says that we're going to artificially make everybody equal in every sense, in every capacity. So those who are no good in math, we'll just make them equal. Those who are no good in athletics, we'll make them equal. You'll have mediocrity. You'll have such a team will lose.
Absolutely.
If you have a competitive team in any area and you choose the team based on this equity business, you know, this team will not perform against some competitor. So United States, in this example, would lose to China because China does not have this nonsense. China is a meritocracy. China is a tough meritocracy. They're saying everybody has to compete and those who are the good performers will win. There's no such thing as, okay, if you lose, then the system is against you and you're going to revolt and all that. They won't tolerate that. So United States will lose competitively to China if things remain like they are. And India is also headed in that way because wokeism has come to India.
Okay, I see. So on that note, if you could also give the example of blacks and their equation with sports and Asians and their equation with math.
Yeah, I mentioned this. I'm glad you picked this out. So, you know, I was in this meeting where we were discussing whether this equity, because they were arguing that they were justifying that there's a quota for admitting Asians into Harvard because on scores they do very well. Okay, so there'll be a large number of Asians getting in, and they don't want that. So they put a ceiling on how many Asians can get in because otherwise, you know, it's not fair according to them. So therefore, it's not a meritocracy, and therefore they want equity, which means equal outcomes of how many people of each race there are, rather than equality of opportunity. So I said, by the same token, short people, Asians are short than compared to blacks, and therefore we are not as good in basketball. So we should say it's oppression. The basketball is a structure of oppression. You guys have designed basketball, put the basket very high, so we Asians cannot compete, and therefore it's unfair. So therefore, whether I threw the basket in or not, I should get the point.
Correct.
To make it equitable.
Right.
Yeah,
that does not sound like the most logical idea out
there.
It
is a stupid thing, but it was to show that how stupid it is.
Right.
And then I said that just like you want to have equitable entry of classes, people entering Harvard class by artificially bringing people in who are not there on merit, the same way the US Olympic team should have a proportionate representation of Asians. That we are overrepresented with blacks in the Olympic team. We should reduce the number of blacks. We'll have to increase the number of whites and a lot of Asians also because we have hardly any Asians. So I said that therefore in every sport and in every, just like if you want in academics equity, then you should have it in sports also. Total silence. They said, we better cancel this fellow because they cannot answer this.
Right.
Because I'm using their logic against them.
Correct.
And they just hate this.
And it's starting to sound a lot like a great disservice to the society.
Right.
So I'm sure there are no rebuttals for that. So I would now like to talk about attacking individualism as you write in your book. If you could please elucidate details on this as
So the best example I'll give you is President Macron of France. He is against wokeism because wokeism says that there should be equity for Muslims in France.
Correct.
So whether they are educated or not, whether they are merit or not, they should be given some quota. Okay, he says this is against the French concept of the French liberalism. The rights, French social justice and French rights make every individual have equal opportunities, not your identity. So you as a Muslim have the same rights as every person, right? But not you as a club of Muslims are going to be given some quota.
Correct.
So it is not, he doesn't want any of this quota, wokeism kind of stuff. So this idea is that as individuals you are equal, but not, there's no identity politics per se. And this is a very big difference between liberalism in the traditional liberalism sense and this new woke liberalism. Woke liberalism is very different from the liberalism that Americans have known all these years.
Correct. Because woke liberalism depends on the existence of groups and the
grievances
victims amongst those groups.
Yes, victims.
Absolutely.
And people who think they're oppressed and they have a big problem with society and they are angry at society. They've been made angry in order for wokeism to work. So this is a problem.
Correct. And also at the same time, it sounds to me like there's elimination of the individual. And as we know that all individuals are different, so even individuals belonging to the same group may have different grievances.
Absolutely.
And not necessarily the same grievances.
Absolutely. And I think it's a metaphysical reality, a spiritual reality that every individual has been given unique qualities, and there are no two same individuals. Like we don't have the same fingerprints, we don't have the same DNA, we are different. And so everyone's got something different and unique, and you cannot on one scale make everybody the same. That's a artificial suppression of creativity, of our evolution, or of our potential. In differences, we should respect each other. Maybe somebody is better in this and I'm better in that, and I respect them for that and they respect me for that. And so each person should find what's good in them.
Correct.
Where is their potential, and that is the Swadharma. And they should follow that. And I should respect other people for their Swadharma.
Correct. Now I would like for you to shine some light upon Martin Luther King and how he and other African leaders who were very influenced by Gandhi, and Gandhi's support of the Varna system as is described in our dharmic tradition, and how, as you mentioned in the book, that the writer Isabel Wilkerson deviates from mentioning that the influence of Gandhi on Martin Luther King in her best-selling book, and how she deviates from that narrative and goes down the line of caste is racism.
Okay, this is a very important point. Let me just unpack the question for the audience. So Martin Luther King saw Gandhi as his mentor, and he was in awe of Gandhi. And Gandhi was very clear. He did not want to dismantle the Varna system. He wanted equality. He wanted equality with difference. In other words, we're all different, but we can have equal rights. We can have equal rights. We can respect each other. Doesn't mean that we have to become same as each other and collapse our diversity. He didn't want that. So Martin Luther King was in alignment with all this. Now we have, in contrast to all that, we have Isabel Wilkerson, who has written this book that is a New York Times #1 bestseller. She's a Pulitzer Prize winner. She's on the Oprah show, and she's all over the place as a big celebrity. And her thesis is that caste is not only caste is racism, but caste is the architecture on which American racism starts. So basically, the caste theory comes out of the Vedas, she says, and she got this out of the Ambedkar people in India when she went for research. And so this caste originating in the Vedas, British learnt it in India and brought it to America, and therefore it shaped their lens for racism.
Right.
So we get blamed, caste gets blamed even for American racism. And then the Germans took this idea and turned it into Nazism, fascism, and Holocaust, the Jews. So actually, caste is a pretty horrible thing all over the world because it's created all this problem. So she says caste is the basic architecture of all this racism everywhere. Now, the strange thing is that in her praise for Martin Luther King, she ignores the fact that Martin Luther King really was a Gandhian. He called himself that, a Gandhian, and his life was, he went to India, came back, and he wrote In the Land of Gandhi. That was his article describing his visit to India. He went to Rajghat, he went to he studied Satyagraha movement, and then he started civil rights. He was inspired by all that. So you see, what people are doing is distorting history. They're picking certain things selectively, rejecting certain things, and coming up with these new theories. So this wokeism and its attack on Indian civilization, which Gandhi stood for, okay,
Correct.
is kind of disingenuous and not very honest.
So basically, I read in the book that it may be her agenda to get the support of blacks on this theory that by drawing parallels that caste is racism. So being a doctor myself and having been a student of science all my life, I have seen that science draws up new frontiers constantly by new research, by research in plant kingdom, in animal kingdom, in amongst humans. And one very good thing about science that I love is that it's constantly trying to unify different species together, let alone just humans, but they will also, now there is new research which through DNA studies tells us that plants and or even rats, cats and humans may share 99% of the same DNA. So when science has already demolished the race theory by saying that there is no difference between different races, why is humanity so obsessed with this idea, and why is humanity so hell-bent upon bringing up these differences again and again, dismantling any sort of unification that may be done on the behalf of science? And as we already know that human psyche takes time to change its ways. It takes time for it to let go of the old ways and let new ways come in. So why does humanity draw up new frontiers constantly by trying to dismantle?
Okay, so you've asked a very good question, and in fact, in some ways, it helps us understand what the opponents are saying, what the people are saying on the other side. They are in fact saying that race is a social construct, that medically there's no difference, but it is society. It is society that's created a hierarchy of whites over superior to blacks and constructed the notion of being whiteness and blackness as socially constructed notions, with certain people having privilege over others. This is what they're saying. And so the skin color is just a marker of privilege and oppression. That's sort of what it is. And so according to them, because it's a socially constructed thing, therefore it ought to be dismantled. That's a social construction should be dismantled, because inherently, once that social construction is dismantled, there'll be no difference left. So they would say medically there is no difference, but socially there is a difference. We should get rid of that social difference. So that's what they're arguing.
Okay, I see. Right, and I would like to end our session for today on this note. And as you very clearly elucidated how the breaking up of America has been taking place, and how it all rounds up back to India, and the effects that it's been happening over here. And I'm so thankful for your clarity on the subject and for guiding the youth on these matters of critical importance. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I cannot wait already for our next session together. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much for asking very sharp questions and drilling deep and pushing and taking it further. I really enjoyed that. And we'll continue our conversation. So we basically talked about America and how all these things have affected America. And we've hinted a little bit about India, but that's a huge topic. We should get into that separately.
Absolutely, sir. I can hardly wait.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.